Right, welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm James Tickell from Campbell Tickell, and I'm going to be hosting and chairing this event. I think it's a fascinating and timely subject. I'm very struck by the fact that artificial intelligence has become a contested space in the world. It's contested between different state actors. It's contested between IT giants, between different organizations, and it remains to be seen, really, how the contest will go and who will emerge on top. And I think, too, there's a lot of talk of AI at the moment. There's talk of how it could, on one level, end the human race, how it could create a utopia. There are different views. I think we can all be certain that the artificial intelligence revolution is a hugely significant event in the history of the human race. And that 5 or 10 years hence, things will be very different. And so we're here today partly to explore that. And before I hand over to our first speaker, I will remind you that today was the day that McDonald's discontinued their use of artificial intelligence because it kept on putting bacon in the chocolate milkshakes. So these things could go in a range of different ways. So I'm going to hand over first to my friend Anthony Allison. Anthony is from Wheatley Group in Scotland, the largest and one of the most innovative organizations in the United Kingdom, who have kindly sponsored this event and is going to start off with a few words of introduction before I move on to the three panelists. So Anthony, welcome. Thank you for your generous sponsorship, and over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. So James, as James said, I'm from Wheatley Group, one of Scotland's largest social housing provider, and we also have a care arm and a factoring arm. One of the things that we've been thinking about lately, both in our kind of senior management team, our IT teams, and with our boards, is what does AI mean for us, or what could it mean for us, and by extension for the sector. So I think for the first time, it feels like it's becoming mainstream. So now what we see is you can't buy a Microsoft package, you can't buy a phone. Everything you see now has got Copilot in it. So we're thinking about, well, what does that mean for us, or perhaps rather, what could that mean for us? So we're thinking about, is it making things faster? Is it making things quicker? Is it making things easier? Is it making things cheaper? And also, we're sort of grappling with the question of for whom. So who should it be a priority for our customers, or for us as an organisation? As we start to think about these things, we're also starting to branch our thinking into, okay, so it's not just what could it do, it's how well could it do it, and things like, what's the ethics that sit behind AI? So actually, what do we know what we're getting into, or have you got enough knowledge to kind of progress it along? And where that might start to straddle between what's an ethical decision and what's a legal decision. So things like GDPR and that type of thing. But what we are is we're really excited about the potential. So when we see some of the really exciting things, especially things that are really relevant for our sector, so things like automated voice transcriptions from one language to another. So we've seen, for example, with damp and mold would be a good example. We've seen issues with breakdown in communication and language issues potentially being fatal. And actually, we've got potentially an AI that you can phone up and speak to our assistant in French, and they hear it in English, for example. But having said that, James, we're at a really early stage, and what we're keen to do is kind of get a sense of what other people are thinking, and actually what kind of things should we be considering, both as an organisation, but also we're talking to our boards about it quite a lot as well.
So on mute. Thank you very much, Anthony. And I think that what you've said underlines for me that the housing sector is probably behind some others in terms of artificial intelligence, that we're still bringing our systems up to, if you like, the standard of the early 21st century, and people aren't really looking yet at the next 10 or 20 years. And I think hopefully today will be the start of an interesting dialogue in that area. So before I go on to our speakers, a word to the numerous participants who've joined us. So if you have questions to ask, please use the question and answer function to do so. The chat box isn't available, but everything you put in question and answer will come to my attention. And if somebody asks a question that you think is interesting, you can upvote it and comment, and that will bring it further up the queue, if you like, as I lead the debate. If anybody wants subtitles, they are available if you enable them. We will share the slides and possibly a couple of articles with participants after the event. And the webinar is being recorded, so I think if you want to share it with colleagues, that will be possible. And we would ask everybody to fill in the feedback survey at the end of it and let us know how we did. So you've had the details of our speakers, but I'm going to first of all introduce, with much pleasure, Dr. Haider Raza, who is the Senior Lecturer in Artificial Intelligence at the University of Essex. We're very lucky to have him with us, and I've had the opportunity to chat with him about some of the work he's doing, which I think is absolutely groundbreaking, and we're going to hear about some of that. And I think your role, if I may say so, is to give us the big picture. What's going on in the wider world? Where is artificial intelligence going? You know, how sensible is it to think that it could be the end of the human race, or is it really going to change everything? So again, without further ado, over to you. And I think we're all very interested to hear what you've got to say. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yep. All right. Hi. Thanks, James. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, I'm a senior lecturer at the School of Computer Science, and I'm here to give you a big picture of AI. So next slide, please. So yeah, so AI is basically a multidisciplinary field of computer science, and everywhere we hear about AI, but means the main core theme of AI and why it means where AI took birth. So AI is all about creating, you can say, a machine which can think and act like human, and it took birth here in Manchester in the UK in 1950s, when the Second World War was there, and by Sir Alan Turing, when he said that, can we design a machine, or can machine think, right? And when this paper came in the literature, basically what people did later, they divided that field into 4 different themes, and I think this is one of the best means I can say the figure, or you can say the best definition I can give you of AI. So AI was divided into 4 different parts: a system that thinks like human, and system that act like human, and system that think rationally, and system that act rationally. Right? It covers all robotics, cognitive science, neuroscience, and whatever the fields of AI are there, you can put each field in a particular section. So this is what AI is, and the ultimate objective is to create a machine which can act and think like human. It's not about replacing human, it's making humans' life easy in doing job. So for example, where we are making error. So the job of AI is just to minimize the error and make the system more efficient, according to me. Right? So slide change, please. Yeah, so means this is a evolution of AI and where the future is going. So, means the first digital computer came before 1950, as I have just told you. And then you can see in 1952 or somewhere in Manchester, this proposal was given, can a machine think? And then first neural network was designed in the form of perceptron in just before 1960, where a first, kind of a, you can say, a neural network was developed just to classify 2 different things. It was very, very basic, believe me. And later, this field basically got lost for next 20 years. But when in 1970s came, again, this field took a rebirth, and a lot of algorithms are being developed. And due to the evolution of hardware, you can see there is a lot of development just because of the companies such as like NVIDIA. We got GPUs, we get more computing power. So people started again coming back to neural network and AI, and they started developing big machines. And then in 2012, AlexNet means deep learning took birth. And since then, the evolution of computer science is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We are seeing good machines. You can see now that automatic cars are there, and driverless cars are there. Everything being driven by AI. So where we are going, so for example, whatever you are doing nowadays, Everything is digital, whether you are shopping on Amazon, you are driving your car with the help of Google Maps, you are moving, your data is being captured. So wherever you are going, your data is being captured, and there is an AI working behind it to make your life a bit easy. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the current state of AI, you can see there are a couple of things going on because I have very limited time. So NLP, which is basically natural language processing, people are working, means understanding your text. We have Alexa at home, we have Siri, means they can understand our language. And there are a lot of media-based AI wherever, whatever the people are tweeting, what are the sentiments. So people are trying to understand that what user wants. Speech recognition is there. We are talking machine learning, means behind every AI model, there is a machine learning model. There are virtual agents. Now, basically, previously there on the websites, basically people chat with their agents, but now virtual agents are sitting where they have predefined frequently asked questions and you can chat to get your answer. Expert systems are there, for example, say in medical industry, basically clinical decision support systems are there, decision management systems are there. Robotic process automation is going on now very much these days. A lot of people are working to automate the process. For example, in NHS, a lot of RPA, means robotic process automation, is going on. They are trying to automate the process. We are also working on a couple of them, and text analytics. So these are the current state of AI where people are using it. Slide, please. So the current shape by 2030 is quantum AI is one of the area where people are working. Integration of quantum computing, because there is a huge, massive amount of data people are trying to mine. People are trying to learn some patterns from that data. So quantum AI is one of the biggest area by 2030. AI ethics, yeah, people are using, but there are no such framework. Although EU came up with the AI framework, but still that is under processing. It's just first draft, you can say. So we need to develop responsible AI. For example, if I'll show you in the future that in upcoming slides that how we are designing a responsible AI model. So for example, if there is a clinical decision support system, if I'm telling that somebody is having a cancer, what evidence I have, right? Can my model explain on the basis of what I am saying that this is a cancer slide or cancerous image? I'll show you later. AI powered creativity, you can see we all have heard about ChatGPT and other different type of models such as DALL-E is there. Whatever you can write, you can create images, you can create videos. So these are some of the recent trends in AI. Next slide, please. AI in healthcare, currently US is one of the biggest market in AI healthcare, although we are not that far, but means we are not that bad as well. But US is one of the biggest player, capturing one of the biggest stake in the market, around 47%. They are working on personalized medicine, disease prediction, virtual health assistants. So these are the area we are also working. We are trying to create treatment plans. We are trying to create disease prediction, as we are working on some of the projects. And for example, you may have heard about a company in the UK. We created a digital NHS or NHS AI lab. Although that the framework was not that successful, but we are not behind as well. UK is working very, very hard, to come up as one of the leader in healthcare in the AI. Next, please. In transportation, I have given you an example. We have autonomous vehicle, we have track management, our rail lines, everything is being operated by AI at the moment. We are capturing data at every place. For example, wherever you are going, we are capturing your gate, we are capturing data through your mobile phone. We are sending alerts that, for example, don't take that road, or M25, avoid that thing. So these type of means development are there. Means in AI transportation. So we have recently given a training basically to the transportation department that how to mine data in a much better way. So yes, we are very closely working with our transportation department as well. Next, please. AI in education, yes, a lot of companies, especially in the east of England, we have a huge amount of companies working on creating personalized learning environments, AI tutors. We are creating games by which people can learn. So, students especially early age students, they don't like reading books as we were grown up. We used to like read books, but now they want to interact and play with the games to learn. So, means these type of development is also going on in AI. And yeah, definitely, as you have seen in the COVID, that everything went virtual. So we need to have a platform. So for example, there is a company called Kaplan, which is giving, an online platform people to learn if they are working. So yes, university is a place, but yes, definitely we are going virtual. So AI in education is also one of the key area. Next, please. Finance, we all know that, algorithmic trading, fraud detection, customer service, these are some of the areas which people are working very heavily, especially banks, because they need to protect the frauds. And to protect the frauds, we need AI models, and people are using AI also to create frauds or to make frauds. So, these are one of the area you have seen that currently uh, every bank have their own chatbots by which you can interact with them. So there is no need of human involvement for answering the basic questions. Uh, so yes, finance is also one of the biggest area. Next, please. Sustainability. We are working on sustainability as well, climate modeling, energy efficiency, wildlife conservation. So just before pandemic, we have started a project in India with the partnership of University of Essex. We have created a model for forest fire protection, because in Himalaya region, soon after the, means in the autumn session, the leaves will fall down, and the villagers basically they put the fire, and the forest get fire. So we created a model just to predict everything in advance, and that model is being deployed. So such type of work is also going on. All of us have now smart monitoring systems at our home. For example, smart water system, that how much water you are using. You are getting alert every day. What is your waste, what type of waste you are creating. So these type of automation is going on, and means just to protect and reduce the carbon footprint in the environment, right? And next slide, please. Yeah. So AI in social housing, as I have told you, means because I have just few minutes left, can bring significant improvement in terms of enhancing management efficiency and improving the quality of the life of residents. So I give you a very nice example what we have done recently. So next slide. I have done a project basically with a company, and the company name is Mersey Homes. It is east of Essex based company, established in Mersey Island, and they are building house across the Essex. And their focus was, basically to build houses with a better quality and with more reducing the carbon footprint. So in social housing, predictive maintenance and assets management is one of the key area. So they are collecting data through analyzing data from sensors, and they are installing smart meters in their homes. Energy management is a key component for them, and tenant screening and allocation, because some of their development is only for tenancy as well. So they are basically using kind of a system by which they can screen the applications of the tenancy, that whether this candidate is a good for for being your tenant or not. Resident support system, yes, definitely. You can have groups where the communities can interact with each other. You can have your common issues solved. So, for example, you don't, if you have a plumbing issue, you don't have to go anywhere. You can simply communicate within your group, maybe, or means, for example, if you are searching within the group, the AI system can tell you that this guy is living in your society who's good in plumbing. You can have that guy. Right. So these type of issues are being supported. Community building and engagement. This is also very important, because AI facilitate for better community engagement by social interaction and preferences. So these are some applications of AI in social housing. And next, please. The project which I was talking about with Mersey Homes, it was funded by Innovate UK, and that in that project there was they came up with a challenge. In the next slide, please. They came up with a challenge that they have a lot of stakeholders within their organization, such as site workers, site managers, and materials and stocks and administrators. The problem is that the whole team communicate with each other, but everything was going on based on papers. So there was information access difficulty, version confusion. For example, is if somebody is buying a house or you have updating your house, the problem is that if you update anything, they have to create multiple copies of the document and send to every office. So it's a create wastage of paper as well. So there are so many different problems. So what we have proposed that we will create a system which is called iBuild, and we will basically digitize their whole system, right? And with the help of AI, we build this solution. And whenever a new house is being constructed, they install a kind of a QR code just outside that site. And let's say a plumber comes, right? So plumber now don't need to go to the head office. They simply scan their QR code, get all the documentation related to maps, plans, and the progress and whatever you have. You get all the means required information to on their device, right? And whatever the work is being done by the plumber, they put it over in that app, and that will be saved in the cloud. So what happens basically, we digitize this, we automated this process. And with the help of this, the company have saved, basically, the system is currently running in Mersey Homes, and company have saved thousands of pounds within an year, right? And especially not not cost. They have saved a lot of time as well, just by this system. And they are also in a process of commercializing the system, because initially this system was built for them. So now we are making it more generic. So any new developer or any existing developer in the market can use their system, right? So the next point, uh, this is one of the important project which is about to finish. So my mainly research are in healthcare, and cancer is one of the biggest problem in the UK, especially skin cancer, and 80% of the death among this is just because of melanoma. And if we detect the melanoma early, what happens that the 5-year survival rate can decrease by basically 20%. So these are some statistics that why melanoma is so dangerous. So what we have designed, next slide, please. What we have designed basically a system. And why this system is important, because in the UK, there is a 2-week wait pathway system. What happens when, for example, if a patient goes to a doctor and the GP suggested that this is a case of melanoma, basically that patient need to be seen by a consultant within the 2 weeks, right? And what happens that basically there is a huge backlog that some of the patients cannot be seen within 2 weeks. And there is, if this is a melanoma, that can lead to the basically to the death, right? So what we need to do, we need to create an AI solution. And to create that AI solution, what we have done, we have built an AI model, and that AI model basically looking at the picture of the melanoma. So for example, if I got a mole on my skin and I'm worried about that, what I do, basically I take a picture of that, right? And I upload to the app. An app can tell you that whether this is a case of melanoma or not, right? Previously, what doctors do, how doctors detect melanoma, they follow ABCDE rule, or they follow 7-point checklist. So what doctor look for asymmetry in the mole. They look the border texture of the mole, of the basically lesion. What is the color of the lesion? What is the diameter of the lesion? And how the lesion is evolving. So this is one of the first rule doctor check for melanoma. Second is 7-point checklist. So these are the two basically framework which doctor follows. So what we have done, we have incorporated that into our app, and we developed this model. And in this model, we have identified that what features are important, right? So the biggest important feature is the pinkness of the lesion. So this is our AI model you can see over here. And over here, you can see this blue tall bar over the left, which shows the importance of the pinkness of the lesion. And when we have tested this on their existing data set, what we have found that that we have outperformed the traditional methods of 7PC and Lynn-Williams, right? And our approach basically detected 83%, 83.16% of specificity, which is much better than, is sensitivity, which is much better than the existing methods. And we are in a process of basically converting the system into a medical 2A class device. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I took up much time, but it's quite important to tell. I can speak for hours, but sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haider.
Thank
How
you.
long do you think it will be before a chatbot can actually have an intelligent chat with somebody? Because at the moment, when I get through to a chatbot,
Yes.
I very often end up wishing to throw my mobile phone over the wall.
Yeah, I can imagine. But the problem is this, means big companies have a good chatbots. It all comes with cost and time, because behind every chatbot, there is a machine learning system sitting. The better data you have, the better chatbot you can have, right? But for example, companies, if they design a model and you can ask a question to that particular chatbot. If chatbot's being trained on that response, it will give you a response near to your question. But if they cannot handle that, what happens? That it will transfer to you a live agent, right? So it all depends. It's people are working on, but believe me, there are companies whose chatbots are pretty good if they are integrated. For example, if you have an API talking to ChatGPT, you can get a better answer.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. We'll some questions at the beginning to come in, and we'll pick that up, I think, in the wider panel discussion. But first, thank you very much for getting us off to a good start. And we will move straight on to Joanna Sedley-Burke, a long-standing and valued associate of Campbell Tickell, who I suspect knows more about the systems employed by housing associations for their different IT needs than anybody else in the world. Not a doctor, but a doctor in my mind, Dr. Joanna Sedley-Burke. Over to you.
Thank you, James. I really appreciate that. And hello to everybody out there. I'm going to get a bit practical in relation to thinking about AI and kind of where do you start. And the reason I say that, and I'll touch on it a bit later, is outside of housing, I'm currently working on an AI machine learning project with Essex University. So Haider and I are working on that for a removals and storage business, which fundamentally is a CRM system. And I will talk to you about some of the ways that I think that can be applied and what I've learned could be applied to the housing sector. But I thought where to start was very much kind of just talk you through our step-by-step process. Now, some of this will sound very familiar for any of you who've been through any business process re-engineering, but there's some different slants. So I will go through these 10 points and then give you some examples. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, actually, if you go back and I will talk through that. So the first piece here is about business process analysis, very much what pretty much you all know, how to do business process analysis, the workflows across an organization. If you've got those, identifying tasks and activities, it's no different from traditional workflow when you're looking at AI projects. What then becomes the challenge is identifying where you've got the opportunity to actually use AI, because you want to pick the areas where you're going to get the most benefit straight away, because obviously the investment is quite a lot. So the collaboration with your colleagues, departments, and also understanding what you can get out of AI is pretty important. And the thing I found with my team was they needed to learn how to get their brain to think about what an AI tool could do, and to take away that sort of human part. The biggest issue within housing and many other sectors is data and the quality of data. What differs here is that the more data you've got, the better your AI tool. So some of you out there thinking, oh my God, we've got so much data and it's in such a bad shape. Sorting the data out will be critical, and unstructured, analysing the kind of unstructured data versus structured data, your databases, and any of your data management processes and practices need to be all collated. But the quantity of data is really important to get effective AI tools. And looking at that as to kind of the relevance of the data. Now, the way that you've got, it doesn't matter which housing management system, you have so much property data. And what we'll be doing over time is getting your AI tools, the machine learning, to drill down into that and to find out what repairs you've done, what type of properties, and then linking that with the assets of those properties. And that's where you can then start to get the machine learning from it. Because there's only been a small amount done within the social housing sector, it's going to be very important to actually go outside for gap analysis in relation to talking to the software providers, but also going out and kind of seeing what other AI could be adopted, what sort of automation is out there. We're lucky that the sector is not, I say not competitive, it is competitive, we just don't call it competitive, but we do collaborate. And I know it will come up later in Joanna's talk, but working in collaboration on this will be absolutely essential, and sharing what we learn from it. The key piece for me now is about determining the skills and technologies that you would want to use as part of the gap analysis. And you'll quickly realise that you don't have the skills, you probably won't be able to employ the skills, not at an affordable level, and that's where the collaboration comes in. Market research benchmarking is a kind of pretty standard when you're doing any projects, when you're looking at tools out there and seeing what the capabilities are. So that's that's the normal piece. This is when it starts to get a little bit different when you're looking at an AI project, is that the prototype development, our proof of concepts, is absolutely critical. And from that, you can actually learn and use the tools that you've developed to learn what's gone wrong through the prototype development, and then drive those benefits further. But getting your stakeholders involved in that prototype process, and getting their feedback and looking at kind of monitoring and managing that data is very critical. Again, I know we're going to talk about this a little later, but risk assessments and mitigation are absolutely critical, because what we're looking at is addressing the issues around data privacy, security, where we've got bias, and regulatory compliance. And these are some very big challenges. And I'll talk a little bit about the difference between CCPA and GDPR in a minute. I'm putting together some kind of implementation strategy. So pretty standard project. We deliver big projects, big IT projects, but just understanding how you're going to be deploying the tools, how you're going to be looking at the automation across the organisation, and the key performance indicators. So these KPIs will need to come very much at the beginning of the project, whereas traditionally they've always been left, oh, never mind, we'll pick those up at the end. We'll look at, performance and reporting right at the end of a project. It's absolutely essential that you, throughout the project and throughout the life of that tool, that you are looking at monitoring, evaluation, and optimizing it, because it will change over time. I said I would just have a quick look at the ethical and regulatory considerations. It goes without saying, I hope, that you absolutely have to do a full assessment of the proposed AI solution in relation to prioritising fairness, looking at the transparency, the accountability and privacy, particularly in the algorithm design. There have been examples where, and I think it was Amazon got caught with part of their AI design that was actually picking up words like women within job applications. So how you deal with the ethics of that, and this will be where I see many boards get involved in the process of, what the tools are, how it's used, and kind of making decisions around, privacy and algorithms. I'd be interested to know a bit later how many of you have already got AI data and privacy on your corporate risk logs, because it probably should be there already outside of major system failure. In order to mitigate the biases that happen in AI models, regular audits need to take place to ensure fairness and to prevent discrimination. And I said about the compliance in relation to CCPA. safeguarding information and robust security systems. And I need to make sure I get the exact wording right, excuse me if I turn away, that the CCPA, which is around the California guidelines, is around information that identifies, describes, and relates to, or could be reasonably linked to a consumer or a household, which is quite different, as you know, from GDPR, which relates to and identifies an individual or somebody. And I think we will need to look at CCPA when we're looking at AI models and not just GDPR. So human oversight, and Haider said it right at the beginning, it's not about replacing them, it's about doing those jobs, but human oversight is absolutely critical so that the tools are used for empowering employees, kind of challenging the algorithms, the decisions, and just reviewing, the feedback that goes on. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so these ones should have been hidden. So you're going to need to whiz through till we get to, because I've just talked, that's it, that's the one. Oh, no, next one down. That's the one. So just picking up on the project, to sort of sharing, I found out that Innovate UK were providing funding as part of a knowledge transfer partnership, and social housing providers are also entitled to apply for this. And it's a three-way project, Innovate UK, Essex University and Trunk Logistics, the business I'm a managing director of. And we only have to contribute 1/3 of the funding, but within that we've got a project, clearly defined kind of outcomes. And my main driver was about improving customer service and learning from where we win business, where we lose business, how we could deliver a better service. And by that I mean, and this is where we talk about some of the amazing things that you can do with machine learning, I want to look at my customer base and compare it against information in the national, the surveys that we do, so the Office of National Statistics. Well, you can do that. You can bring in data from external tools quite easily. So if I'm looking at my customers and thinking about it from a social housing perspective or any kind of customer management perspective, knowing that a particular area has experiences of certain things that these individuals have declared. It might be age, it might be property type, lifestyle, those sorts of things, and being able to match that with the service we deliver, for me, is phenomenal. To be able to do it by postcode, absolutely amazing. We have so much data, but what we realised is that our data quality, like all businesses, was a bit of a challenge. So that was one of the biggest lessons learned. But we actually, what surprised me is that the specialist who we've employed to do this role actually is using AI tools to improve our data quality. So that has been an amazing piece of work for us. And using those external data sources comes with ethical considerations. So where you get that data from is critical. So I'm making sure that we use it from very well-known and approved sources. Staff engagement is critical if you're going to be changing work practices in any way. And what I've identified is that we did not have the skills internally, and we were never going to have the skills internally. So we employed somebody as part of this process with Essex University, and they helped us recruit an amazing individual who has transformed the way we deliver projects. If I could have the next slide. So I've been thinking over the last few years about how we could use AI tools. There are so many ways in housing, but these are my top 5. And the first one comes from the work that Essex have done around melanoma, skin cancer, is around damp and mold. So we know many of us have this issue. We don't know whether it's caused by lifestyle, but actually damp and mold has quite a unique imaging. There is a lot of it all around the world. And if we're taking photos of it and then saying, actually, the outcome of this kind of mold was this sort of outcome, it's not going to take long before we can identify what the correct action should be, how we advise the resident, but also tying that in with the property, so that if we know that we've got X number of properties that might have different addresses, but they're the same age, the same windows, the same whatever it is, that we can tie that together. And the same applies with antisocial behaviour. Years ago, tried working with GIS systems, mapping out where antisocial behaviour was. It was challenging, and we were trying to bring together all these different tools. But that's where we can use AI to actually bring that information together. You're looking at Google Maps, you're looking at complaints, you're looking, even if you've got it in disparate systems within your organisation, that can be done. I saw there was a question about repairs. So property profiling for repairs. Again, all of this information can be brought through an AI tool, and learning when you're doing repairs, when you've replaced it. For me, leads on to the cost profiling of works with contractors, with properties. And, you know, we used to have this huge amounts of data and trawl through it, spreadsheets, all sorts of cubes of data that we would analyse. And I think that AI will be able to offer much better solutions. And the final one for me is looking at tenancy failure, which is a cost to the organisation. But understanding the reasons why, the types of tenants that may have gone in, what the properties, whether it's due to the community, the individual skills, all of those sorts of things, because, you know, avoiding tenancy failure would be just as critical, really. I think I'm out of time. I could talk about this for hours. So I think that's the last slide. She says, hopefully. Any more? No. Phew.
That's
So
great. Thank you. Thanks,
is that
Joanna.
okay?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So there's a lot of questions coming through on the general theme of what should housing associations be thinking about now. So I think we all know that, you know, already a large housing association may have spent up to 50 million, 30 million on their existing kind of steam age systems, and they're still struggling to make them work really well. How much do you think they need to be thinking about spending in the next 5 years on artificial intelligence? And, you know, is it going to be only accessible to large ones? Should they be clubbing together? Should there be a sector solution, perhaps?
Yeah, I would like to see collaboration and a sector solution, because one of the challenges that residents have when they move between organisations is that they get potentially different services. And this is such a big one. And the investment, if it goes wrong, or you don't get the project right, or you pick the kind of wrong areas, and you haven't got the right data, then that will be an absolute waste. And if you're looking at data quantity, and we know that the greater the quantity of data, albeit good data, the better the results you will get. To have some kind of system that is available to and invested by multiple organisations, kind of on a property tenant basis, per head, per property. Maybe we at Campbell Tickell need to think about how we facilitate that discussion after today, if there's anybody interested to talk about how we can take that forward. But I personally think it needs to be collaboration, because the current software providers, albeit housing management or kind of outer sector, more kind of periphery providers, are not going to invest in this kind of solution. It will not make the money for them. Having, as many of you know, having worked for a software provider for a number of years, they will not make the investment on this. So, and I think from an ethics perspective, I'm not sure you would want them to. We'll come back to that maybe. But yeah.
If I can ask Anthony as our sponsor, Anthony, what's your reaction to the idea that maybe it would be good for the sector to kind of move together on this rather than each organisation developing its own solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably two things for me, James. One is, clearly there's a lot of things we've all got in common. So we all do repairs, we all deal with ASB, etc. So there's a massive amount of commonality in terms of actually what an AI response to the issue. I think one of the bigger challenges will be around about there's sort of we don't have commonalities and things like how we collect data, what systems we use, etc. So I think it sounds like a fantastic idea to collaborate and come together. I think what's perhaps a more realistic proposition is collaboration on what an answer might be. So, for example, develop a system that can look at these types of things that can give you this type of thing out. So an output. So we done, for example, machine learning, and we looked at this with this type of algorithm, and we identified this, rather than actually an algorithm that can work in everyone's systems. So I think what you run the risk of is you spend so much time trying to get everyone in common that actually before you know it, you're 10 years old, and actually what you started on is no longer AI anymore.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, we've been looking at whether we could have an algorithm to look at rent setting and all the different kinds of rents and monitor which ones have been correctly set and which ones, as so often is the case, aren't. But Joanna, Bouloux, we're going to move on to you, and maybe some of what's just been said will segue into some of the thoughts you're going to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So just to finish the introduction, sorry, Joanna is a partner at Devonshires, and most people will know that Devonshires are one of the leading law firms that work with housing associations in England and Wales rather than Scotland, but and have extensive involvement in this field. And one of the things I've noticed is that actually it's the lawyers who are ahead of the game in terms of artificial intelligence, because they're using it already for things like analyzing the leases on large portfolios that are being transferred. So very much looking forward to what you've got to say, Joanna, because I suspect that, as I say, you and your firm are probably slightly ahead of the rest of the sector. So over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I'm often called ahead of the game, but I'll certainly take it.
Yep.
So I head up Devonshire's IT contract work, and as a result of that, I kind of have a lot of involvement in AI for our clients and see a lot of the projects that they're involved in. If we could move to the next slide, please. So this is really high level, my agenda. To some extent, a lot of what I'm going to talk about has been mentioned in some way or another. We've had a far more detailed explanation of what AI is and how it works than I think I could attempt to offer up, but I think everyone will agree that AI is growing in importance with the kind of introduction of generative AI, so AI that can actually produce its own content. It's really taken off. It's everywhere. Everybody's talking about it, thinking about what they need to be doing. I couldn't help but notice that AI featured in both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party manifesto for the election. It's on everybody's lips, and I think to some extent we can thank ChatGPT for that. I'm sure most of you on this call have had a go at ChatGPT. If you haven't, I do suggest it. It's not going to solve everything or change your life, but it can be quite useful if used in the right way. And as Joanna has mentioned, the key in all AI is data. The more data, the better. You need good data. If you put bad data in, you get bad information out. But, as Joanna has mentioned, there are things that can be done to sort of improve your data. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. This is largely what I've just been talking about in terms of what AI is and the importance of data. So next slide, really important one. AI in the housing sector. What are we seeing? So chatbots, I think everybody acknowledges, have been around for quite some time. As James has mentioned, some are better than others. They are a really important tool for customer service. As AI is sort of growing, we are seeing not just chatbots that are better able to behave like a human in interacting with your customers. They can also, as has been mentioned, they can translate, but they can also provide feedback to your organization as to how the customer interaction has gone. So they can pull out themes that otherwise you might not be being informed about. They can tell you whether, generally things are going well or badly, what went well, what went badly. You can have updates to say, we are receiving lots of interaction in relation to this specific issue. This is particularly important to our residents. This is particularly upsetting our residents. This is making our residents happy. and it can prioritize those things. It can also assess when people need to be put through to real life people based on the tone of the call and how it's going. Now, I'm conscious that this slide often comes across a bit like a sales pitch. Later, I'll give a more balanced view in terms of some of the weaknesses, but I just want to acknowledge that I am slightly sounding like a salesperson at the moment. AI meeting notes. As James mentioned, a transcription of this webinar will be made available. That's using AI, but what AI meeting notes can also do is it can produce key bullet points, action notes. It can put it into a format that you want it to, produce summaries. It can circulate it to people, all of those kind of really sophisticated things. There are obvious considerations that need to be taken into account with these kind of things in terms of data protection, making sure you've got people's consent, risk of inaccuracies. The other thing that it's really important to be considering is unintended consequences. So taking sort of Teams calls, those kind of things, generally they can be used for, let's call them off the record discussions. And if you have humans attending those calls, if you move to an off the record discussion, people generally exercise their discretion and they don't make a written note of that part of the discussion. AI meeting notes are not necessarily there yet. So we are looking at a situation of needing to sort of turn the function off and then turn it back on again. And it's about making sure that we're not accidentally slipping into creating written records of off-the-record discussions. We've spoken a bit already about repairs and maintenance and some of the work that AI can do here in terms of being both predictive and proactive. So what it can do is it can use the data to say, you know, X% of this type of boiler of this age with a similar usage amount have failure of this particular part within X number of months of the date that you are at. And that allows the landlord to have a sort of fair, accurate warning on the fact that it's likely to need to pre-order parts. It can even pre-organize repairs before it has failed, which obviously is more efficient because you're not doing something in a hurry, and it's also better for your residents. It's also used for matters such as rent and arrears management, so it can automated processes to save time in terms of chasing things up, but also predicting and preventing those arrears. So spotting when people are likely to get into financial difficulty based on data, based on patterns, allowing early intervention, spotting the people that, you know, your team may need to contact on a personal level to ensure that everything's going okay. And then I guess to me, what feels like more at the kind of cutting edge of things, but very kind of relevant for the housing sector, is using sort of sensors to gather data, and they can be used in a number of ways. So where you have vulnerable residents, you can receive notifications if a resident hasn't turned on a light switch or hasn't turned on their kettle within a certain period of time. So you get an early warning that something might be wrong. Obviously, there are issues in terms of they would need to notify you if they were going away. Then we have damp and mould. Joanna's already talked a bit about this, but there are also other ways that the damp and mould usage could be put into place. So, for example, assessing which properties are more likely to suffer from damp and mould based on humidity, based on temperature, based on all of those kind of things, and then predicting before the damp and mould arrives those properties which you may need to try and sort of take preventative steps. Decarbonisation and also damp and mould in terms of looking at how long does it take to heat up a property? What is impacted by that? Does a change of boiler help? Does insulation help? You know, and then allowing sort of strategic decisions to be made that say, from a cost benefit analysis, when we did this, it had a big impact, it had a small impact, and using those things to sort of really inform your decision making and understand what's going on in your properties. Now, I have to mention this just because when talking about decarbonisation, one of the kind of downsides of AI that I think the AI world has yet to solve is that AI is very, very energy hungry. So we do end up kind of consuming an awful lot of electricity just because of the amount of data churn that is involved, the data centers that are involved. It is very electricity hungry. So that might not actually be a direct cost to your organization, but it's certainly something from an environmental perspective that it is worth having an eye on and being aware of. And then, you know, as with absolutely everything, you've got to ensure that you're complying with necessary legislation, so data protection legislation. Not all of the data that's used in AI is going to be personal data, but absolutely some of it will be, and it's about making sure that when you are using that data, that you are complying with the necessary regulation, and that you have the necessary consents involved. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then finally, just in relation to the housing sector, sort of a further point on what was just being discussed in terms of collaboration. So I think one of the great strengths of the sector is in its ability to collaborate and its willingness to sort of share knowledge, share what they're working on, work together to achieve common goals. And collaboration in this sort of world can be achieved in a number of ways. So one thing could simply be aggregating the data. So even if it's not the full step to working towards a full common kind of app or system, sharing the data, because the more data you have on, you know, when your boilers are going wrong, the more informed the information that's coming out. But then there is also the joint development work, sharing of resources, those kind of things. So if I could have the next slide, please. This is a bit more legal, but I'm going to try and keep it not too boring because I appreciate the legal side can be a bit dry. So key risks and legal considerations when kind of thinking about AI. The first one is confidentiality. So many models, such as ChatGPT, something like that, are likely being used by your employees already. Whether or not you've kind of officially authorized that, people are using them. One of the key things to be aware of is something like ChatGPT is not necessarily confidential. And so, you know, it's important to have clear guidelines within your organization to ensure that those risks are being minimized. So all your employees need to be aware that they shouldn't be putting confidential information into ChatGPT. It sounds obvious, but I think it's one of those ones that sometimes seems so obvious that people forget to make sure it's in place. The next one that can be a bit muddy with AI is copyright. This applies in two different directions. So the first is AI itself, because it is trained on and mining all this data, there are potential copyright infringement issues when the AI system has been trained on or is using copyrighted works and they don't have the copyright owner's consent. We are starting to see an acknowledgement of that now. So, for example, Microsoft has now included for its paid AI stuff a copyright commitment, which means that they essentially agree to indemnify you if it's found that their AI is infringing a third party's copyright. But that's absolutely not the case for all AI and it is something to watch out for. The second sort of complication is in terms of the work produced by AI. So your typical situation, if you have an employee or you have paid a software company to develop something for you, it's quite clear who's going to own the copyright. With AI, there is firstly a question mark as to whether or not copyright does exist. Generally speaking, it's considered that it does exist, depending on the nature of the work and the level of human involvement and those sorts of things. But there will still be questions about who is going to own that copyright. So is it going to be the person who entered the prompts or used the AI, so your organization? Is it going to be the developer of the AI? Do you care? Those sorts of things need to be considered. Now, underlying bias has already been spoken about. AI is trained on data. It's very difficult to gather and adjust data to eliminate bias. However, there are steps that can be taken, such as making sure you understand that data, that there's human oversight. I think this is a good opportunity to introduce a couple of amusing anecdotes because, well, they make me laugh. So two examples of bias in AI. AI was asked to produce an image of a chief executive. As I'm sure you can all imagine, it produced an image of a white middle-aged man. Now, that's entirely predictable. And, you know, I think we could have all seen that one coming, but it's a good way of understanding how bias comes through in data and that it's important to be aware of the fact that that's happening. Another one is a company used AI to assess its applications for an IT job. And the majority of the applicants were men. So the model taught itself that that meant that men were better at IT. As a result of that, it only put forward men as its suggestions for people who should be interviewed for the job. Now, that was something that the model taught itself based on the fact that more men were doing it and therefore they must be better. And you can see how it came to that conclusion, but obviously it's not the conclusion that you want it to be coming to. So it's just really important to be aware of that. Manipulation. So AI is fantastically clever. However, it is still capable of manipulation, and it can be encouraged to do things that you aren't necessarily intending for it to do. I'm sure you all saw the article in the news earlier this year where we had a UBS chatbot that swore and also said negative things about UBS, and that was manipulated by the person that it was having the chat with. But you know, that has potential sort of reputational risks, and not the sort of thing that you want to be experiencing. Next on my list is transparency and explainability. So Joanna's already mentioned this. It's really key for kind of governance, compliance. It's really important to make sure that you've got clarity on the type of data that your model is trained on, what's being done to mitigate bias. Do you understand how and why the algorithms reach a particular outcome? And do you know if the model is based on other models, and do you understand that underlying data? Next slide, please. So service failure. There are a number of ways in which a service failure can arise. It could be that the internet is down, there's a problem with your system, the supplier system, there could be a cyber attack. But with increasing reliance on tech and automated processes, this can have a really significant impact if a service failure does occur. You know, it can be from a complete down to repairs being misclassified, those kind of things. And obviously those have risks in terms of regulatory and reputational. Data is key. Ownership, who owns the data? Who owns your data? Who owns your residents' data? So your AI model provider is likely to want access to that data, want to be able to use that data. They're likely to take that into account in their pricing. Do you have the necessary consents for that? Are you comfortable with that? Who is going to own the data that is then produced by the model? Again, your AI provider is likely to want that data as well as being happy for you to have that. And then in the background of all of this, of course, as I've already mentioned, is GDPR and making sure that you've got the necessary consents and that you're doing it all in a compliant manner. That links into the use of data. We've spoken quite a bit about quality of data. And then finally, data integrity. As I'm sure you're all aware, cybersecurity is increasingly important. It's also increasingly sophisticated as people are using AI for cyber attacks. It's also particularly significant because as we have more and more data being collected, the rise of cyber attacks and the importance of cyber attacks is really sort of rising. And then finally, moving on to my final slide, just in terms of key takeaways. So AI is not just an IT department issue. It's a board level issue. It's strategic. I think it belongs on your organization's risk register and its opportunity register, managing the potential risks in terms of technological, regulatory, reputational, being aware of them, having a conscious awareness of your data, both in terms of how good it is, how you're using it, that you have human oversight, avoiding using AI for critical decisions or where human welfare is involved. And, you know, having a strategy that takes into account the fact that there are competing priorities here, there are limited funds, and how are you going to use AI? How are you going to embrace it? Is it going to be at the kind of level of Copilot, which is much more generic, but can still save time and be very useful, more of the kind of AI meeting note variety? Or are you going to be looking at things that are more housing specific? I'm hoping I finished roughly on time.
Thank you very much, Joanna. That was interesting and sobering. And I'm actually certainly aware of a case where people asked which tenants were at risk of tenancy problems, tenancy failure, and the answer came back basically your tenants from ethnic minorities.
Yes.
So that's almost a similar example to the one you gave. Have you come across that particular issue where AI
so one of the
reinforcing
things, yeah, AI has done that I'm aware of is it has flagged people as being at risk of sort of abuse And what it's failing to do is take account of sort of cultural variations of the way that things are normally done. And that is exactly the kind of thing where you need to make sure that you properly understand what AI is asking the data, and that you've got a human that understands sort of overseeing what's being pushed out the other end.
Brilliant. So thank you all three, and we've got some time for debate. I have a question to get us going, and they're all based on what's come in, and thank you to people for their observations so far. I suppose what I'm kind of thinking is AI going to replace the big systems, the ERP systems or similar that people have spent tens of £millions on, or is it going to sit above them and just sort of make them more efficient? Or is actually, are today's systems going to be outdated in 5 or 10 years' time, and something very different will be there in their place? Dr. Haider, do you want to start on that one? Because it's probably a very big picture question. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. So I would say it is not that easy to discard existing ERP systems. Although there may be a transition period, like, where the information which exists by or held by the ERP system that need to be, mined or, captured in a better way to be transformed or you be transferred into a new systems. But everything have a time, or you can say, a life. Definitely at some stage, those ERP system will be nowhere. But if you can see maybe next 10 years, 5 years, it is not going anywhere, because we are hugely dependent upon them, and they are a source of information, and companies are heavily dependent upon them.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's slightly reassuring, I think, that
Yeah.
the world isn't going to look completely different. Joe Sedley-Burke, you know a lot about the systems organizations have, and the data they do or don't have. What would your perspective be on that?
Yeah, I would agree completely. And I think if you take your lead, or we take our lead from the banking systems, many of the old school banks still have systems that are now 10, 20 years old, the underlying database, because there's just too much to move to put it into something else. But no user gets to see it. And I think that will be the world that we live in. It will be dashboards and actions, as opposed to kind of inputting. And I think for me, somebody asked the question about, what's it going to replace and how's it going to work? I think the admin tasks, particularly, and even those admin tasks, and say, oh, well, you never replace us with a computer because you never know, it's different every time. Well, actually, we're going to learn from that. And the longer we go on, we will learn from that. So a lot of those basic tasks will be replaced, freeing up people to do the bit in social housing that could never be replaced, which is the face-to-face piece.
Yeah, no. So, for instance, my memory tells me that British Airways operated a 1970s seat reservation system until well into the 2000s. I think it was called Sabre, and I think it's actually gone now, but it was there for nearly 50 years.
Yeah, and NatWest is the same. They have a system that I think they are just in the process of allegedly replacing, but it's been there since the 1970s in some shape or form.
Because that's where the data was.
Yeah.
So they couldn't. And so, Joanna, Bouloux, the risk, given that many organizations have actually quite poor data at the moment, there is a big risk, I would think, and probably a legal risk of using poor data to make important decisions. Are you seeing that already?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's really important to understand where you are using poor data, the potential impact of that poor data. I think the way we are seeing it at the moment is that there is that level of human oversight to ensure that you've kind of got a sensible check on what is happening. So you're not having sort of automated decisions being made yet. You're having almost suggestions being made, ideas for strategies being put forward, and then humans are assessing that, which I think will continue to be of importance, but is particularly important when you're working on sort of imperfect data.
No, indeed. And I think we have heard examples of AI being used to identify imperfect data. I've certainly seen that on the kind of portfolio transfers to identify those leases on properties that were anomalous and perhaps needed checking.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And I mean, going back to your earlier question, it can sort of mine your various systems and pull it all together without sort of that manual process. And that's one of the kind of real time-saving things that it's able to do.
Yeah. So there was a question from Steve Aleppo, I think, earlier, and I'd probably ask all of you, including Anthony, to comment on this. I mean, do we feel that the advent of AI is really going to change the feel, the culture, the shape of the sector, how organizations create the structures to deliver? Is it going to look very different as a result of this, or is it just going to be similar to now, but a little bit more efficient? Dr. Haider, why don't you go first on that one? Because probably the health paradigm has a lot of parallels.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Can you repeat the question, please?
Well, it's really about to what extent the artificial intelligence that people use is going to change the very nature of the organizations, the culture, the structures they have, how they interact with residents. Or is it just going to be like, a bit like before, but perhaps a bit more efficient and perhaps a fewer staff needed for some jobs?
Yeah, I mean, organizations are gradually, they're adopting to basically AI in their culture. They're upskilling their staff, they're upskilling their staff. And I would say, means it will not take off the jobs, but definitely it will create more jobs as well. Like if you are reducing, some labor, you would say, but it will create some more opportunity for the people around the community where they can do a better job in terms of, creating more or producing more better systems or better output. So means ultimately, in summary, I would say, yeah, there will be more jobs, more opportunity, and the companies need to adopt, whether it's small, big, or large. Everyone basically know what is the power of AI. And the best thing is that now people understand that data is the fuel and data is the gold for them. So whether it's a small organization, big, or a medium organization, everybody is now focusing on capturing their data, which they can use for basically mining and finding some pattern which can be good for predicting or increasing their business in a positive way.
Yeah, good. Joe Sedley, what would your take be on that?
I think it will dramatically change it, but not immediately, if that makes sense. In the same way that when many organisations introduced document management, what was once a post room was probably the least skilled staff opening a letter, stamping it and putting it in a tray, became someone who was deciding whereabouts in the business it needed to be done, the keywords in the letter. So it changed the skill set in different roles. And, the next one for me, or perhaps even before document management, is email. How different were we before we had email? And I think AI, so we're still existing, we're still doing, but we do it in a very different way. We can speed up how we do it. We've got records. And so I just think we will still be here. Housing will still be here. And I'm not entirely sure we're really going to know what it's like until we're in it. And then we remind ourselves, what was it like when I had a secretary and I had memos that got picked up and delivered to head office, and everything took 5 days, and that was okay.
It was better, really, wasn't it? Joanna, Bouloux, it's going to change the legal profession as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think probably across all professions, there's the kind of, what does this mean for us? Does it fundamentally change things? I think probably the way I see it changing both the legal sector and the housing sector is it's going to enable people to become more efficient. And it's going to enable, the same stuff is going to be done, but in the housing sector, it's going to open people up with a bit more capacity to focus on the residents that really need it, the sort of face-to-face engagement, those kind of things, as you're kind of automating some of the other tasks that were being done in the background by people. And, you know, for the lawyers, it's about making sure that you're, you know, doing the sort of value add and the bit that only a human can do, taking account of all the kind of efficiencies that can be produced by AI.
Yeah, good. And Anthony, you've been listening patiently. Do you think that Wheatley is on the verge of looking very different? And perhaps there may be other questions you want to ask. I know you are interested in risk and bias.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on the precipice of kind of maybe perhaps institutionalizing the curiosity of what AI can do for us. So do I think we're on the precipice of a massive change? Not quite yet, but do I think we're much closer than we were? Yes, I think we are. So I think what we've now got is we've got people thinking about it and what can it do, and people tend to, perhaps not surprisingly, they're pretty sort of self-focused on what they reflect on. So what they look at is what can make my life easier, and that's okay if that's what we can do. The point on risk and bias is one that I always find curious. So I guess it's a question maybe perhaps from the fellow panelists about, do we hold AI to a higher standard than we do people? So Joanna, you talked about the getting it wrong because you picked out a chief exec as a white middle-aged male. So do you think people would have given any different answer of that? And we talk about things, okay, one of the protections is that a human will check it. Well, actually, is that really that much of a protection? And I think about examples of if a self-driving car has one small accident, it's off the road, it's banned, we should never do it. Yet humans have millions of accidents every single year. And I guess one of the things I kind of question is whether we'll spend so long hand-wringing about the risk associated with bias and all this kind of stuff that we'll hold ourselves back without actually reflecting on how much risk is in the system right now. So I'd be interested to hear sort of Joe and Joanna's kind of view on whether that's an issue we have to give some consideration to.
Great. Well, look, I think we'll go to everybody for that. And I'll start with Joanna Bouloux, if I may.
Yeah. So I think in a way, you're probably right that we do talk about AI and bias and wiping out bias in a way that, you know, we would never seek to do with a human. But I think the subtle difference is that with a human, there tends to be some level of consciousness of the bias, whereas what you have in an AI model is the AI model has no consciousness of that bias. And so, you know, we might all think of a white middle-aged man when we think of a CEO, but we are probably also aware of the fact that there are other possibilities, and that you know that some of that is based on historical kind of thoughts, and that might be outdated, and maybe we shouldn't think it, and all of those kind of things. Whereas an AI model will just think white middle-aged man, and that is where the kind of human oversight sort of kicks in, and then you know. I think for organizations, it's not about seeking to wipe it out because, as you say, we can't be that in humans or in AI, but it's about being aware of it and thinking about what we're going to do about it if we think that might cause us a problem, so that we're not sort of self-perpetuating it, essentially.
Great. Joanna Sedley-Burke.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's good to be challenged on bias, and from a decision-making perspective, I think it's very healthy to have an AI decision and then to have a human decision. And so actually, we're looking at that point around bias. So challenge us as humans, because if you based it on absolute, you know, the information that is out there, you would get the white CEO. So therefore, you pick up on the human bias. And so I think it's very important for us to recognise that, yes, there's bias in AI. We have the ability to find it. What we don't really have is the ability to find it in humans. So for me, it's a good challenge. And I spend a lot of my life dealing with training people in unconscious bias as humans. So perhaps it will hold us to account a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's really
I certainly don't want it to stop us.
Very interesting question from Anthony, because actually it's almost we would prefer to be run over by a drunk driver than by an AI that's gone a little bit amiss. We'd feel much better about being in A&E after the first and the second event. Dr. Haider, the last word for you on this one, please. You're on mute, I'm afraid.
My bad. Sorry about that. So I would say, I'll give you an example. So the melanoma system, the cancer detection system, which we are developing, according to the stats, according to the literature, detecting melanoma by a human expert, or you can say a consultant, is nearly around 94 to 95%. Right, but the system which we developed in terms of correctly detecting it, it's 97 point something percent. Right. So we are challenging human at the moment. We are nearly 3% better. And the point is that that what we are trying to avoid any such bias, that explaining the decision. So what we are doing, that when we get the image, and we are basically trying to annotate on the image on based on what features we are saying that this is melanoma. Right. So yes, a transparent AI and trustworthy AI is one of the key thing, especially when you are making a decision in real time and where the life of a human or anything is involved, especially in medical industry. So avoiding bias is one of the biggest area in AI. That's why explainable AI and trustworthy AI is there. And we are very hard, working that how can we avoid it? And yes, it's one of the key component in terms of adapting it, because no one can rely. For example, I'm just taking one more minute. For example, you're traveling to, again, I'm on M25, but if a Google Maps is saying to you, take a diversion, right? And if the map is not telling you why to take a diversion, because there is a crash or something happened, it's because you get a confidence, like, okay, there is a crash, and the crash may take up to 30 minutes to clear. Right. But if there is a congestion or something, you can stay on that road. Okay, there is a hope it will get clear within 15 to 20 minutes. So, that icon of a crash over there, that's an explanation to a decision that Google Maps is saying, along with an explanation that give you a confidence that, okay, I can rely upon it. So that's the power of the decision, which can help you to trust, on the decision.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's very interesting. No, thank you. And I have a
James.
system, I'll come to you in a second. I have a system called Waze, Dr. Haider, and
Yep.
9 times out of 10, it's right. But the one
Yes.
time out of 10 that I'm right, I'm so pleased. I don't take the diversion. Joe Sedley-Burke, yeah.
It was just about that point that we put that trust because it says a crash, there is a crash.
Yes.
It's not because Starbucks have sponsored the tool and if you go this way, you're going to drive past 5, and by the time you get to the 5th one, you're going to stop and buy one. So we there is an element of trust around that. Just challenging the bias.
There is a very nice article in somewhere in the New York. What they done, one of them there's some form of robbery where they have used this. They put a lot of mobiles, and they kept it as stationary on the roads, and open their Google Maps. It shows the road is blocked. Just to avoid the traffic, just to cause the crime. So there are so many different cases, So yeah, uses are there, but people can use it for good. People can use it for bad.
Very good. Now we're supposed to finish at 12:30, so I'm going to take one more question and put it to everybody, and I'm going to give Anthony the last word on this question, as well as kind of finishing it, the session for us. And the question really, it's from Andrew Rafferty. And to paraphrase it, Andrew is saying there's a lot of snake oil salesmen or possibly saleswomen about it at the moment. Everybody's trying to sell you AI solutions and get you to sign up for this and sign up for that, and making all sorts of promises about what can and can't be delivered. So I think to finish off the session, it'd be really good to get some words of advice from each of you about what to avoid now. We've had this session today. It's been really revealing. People are thinking about it in boardrooms and executive tables all around the country. But let's have a few notes of caution about what to be careful of. And Dr. Haider, I'll start with you on this one, and then I think I'll give the lawyer the second last one. But what's to be careful about?
Yeah, so a lot of claim are coming that I have seen basically as I am a co-founder of a company, a lot of people come to you and claim that they use AI and their product is quite good, And people get fascinated that, yeah, means, and once you use the product, you feel it's good for nothing, right? So yes, means it all depends, because some of the big companies, they're expensive if you use their AI product. So if you have low budget and you really want to use some system which is good, or means, but the ways you can filter it out is how good, basically, what is their presence in terms of in the market, who are their clients. People can fake on this as well, but means how I can basically identify that, on which I can rely, is that means who are the core members in their team, are they good or not, who are their clear clients, and maybe I would say what are their basically policies on protecting your data. So these are one of the key things which you need to see, because wherever we see accept or allow cookies or anything, we just press on yes. We don't see that how they are using our data, and this is one of the biggest challenge, I would say. Be careful how people are using your data. Don't say yes to everything. There is no harm in saying no, and always rely on the people who have good presence in the market. Means don't blindly go with the new players. It's not that I have a hate for the new players, but definitely you need to see and filter it out, that what is good and what is bad.
Great. So that's very useful note of caution. Joe, Sedley-Burke, do you want to add some more cautionary thoughts?
I do. I guess I've got two directions on this, which is nobody should be buying any software if you don't actually have a need for it. If you've got a need and what this supplier shows you and is able to demonstrate and reference and everything else, if that meets the need, well, then that's kind of answered it. If you're worried about their pitch on AI, then you need to get more into the kind of the technical understanding, the ethical considerations that they've used, how they're storing the data, where it is, and have a bit more of a techie conversation, not a sales conversation. No pitching. Obviously, we can help with that. Sorry about that.
That's great. And Joanna, Bouloux, they say there's no such thing as free legal advice, but this is about as close as it gets. What are your thoughts?
So I think I have a few things to say. So the first thing is, don't just go for AI because AI is better, right? What is the AI adding to the product? And do you want AI for that? Because as we've all mentioned, people are using it to charge more and as a buzzword. But do you actually want something with AI functionality for this? And what do you want to use your AI for? What's your strategic priorities? If you're choosing a supplier, ask around. Have any other RPs use them? As I mentioned before, you're a really collaborative industry. And I frequently find that when we're sort of doing large IT contract projects, you will ask other RPs how they found a solution to something or what they managed to agree or those kind of things. And that gives you a great deal of power when negotiating with the suppliers, in terms of you're able to say, well, no supplier, I know that you have done something differently with another RP. So use that. And then finally, understand what you're signing up for and where that places you in terms of the kind of legal terms and your strength, and who's going to own the data, who's going to own any copyright, those kind of things. Where it's a sort of standard product off the shelf and you're just kind of like using a access to a standard SaaS product or something like that, at that point you're more likely to be contracting on their standard terms where they get to own the data and those kind of things. If you're going for a bespoke product where they're doing significant development for you, at that point it's really worth making sure that you are kind of thinking about having the necessary ownerships and rights that otherwise they might be pushing back against.
Great, thank you very much. Well, that brings us pretty much exactly to 5:30. So before I hand over to Anthony, first of all, I would like to thank all of the speakers on behalf of the audience for giving us a really entertaining and thought-provoking session. That was great. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Anthony and Weekly Housing for their generous sponsorship, as I've said before, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that. And I would like to hand over to Anthony for any last observations, last words, and to close us down. So Anthony, the last word really is yours.
I think the problem with the last word, James, is always you're repeating what other people have said. So I'm going to do that a little bit. But I think for me, on AI, probably the two biggest things for me, and we've discussed this quite a lot, and really is start out with what do you have a problem with, and can AI be a solution rather than AI being a solution and you're trying to find a problem for it. So that's been one of the big things for us. And probably the second thing, I think it was Joe who mentioned it, was that please let your tech guys in there first. Most of our tech issues, and by extension that'll be the same with AI, is when we let people go and buy them without getting the tech people involved first. I was that close to saying tech guys there. The tech people involved first. And I think probably my final observation is that when I think about what we've been talking about today, it is a bit of a sense of that perhaps we were wondering if you were at too early a stage where we should have been for the size of us as an organisation. But I'm not really picking up a sense of it. Anyone's particularly that advanced on this.
No.
So I think this is the best time to start collaborating, discussing whatever phraseology or nomenclature one wants to use. It's a good time to do that now. One of the things we're doing a lot is speaking to people out of sector. So there's a lot of innovation going out, or early adoption happening elsewhere. What we're thinking about is where can we sit back and let someone else, frankly, take the risk or take the pain and learn the lessons. So we're talking to a lot of other industries in the Scottish public sector more widely. I think that's something that's really important going forward. But other than that, thanks very much. It's been great for me to hear from others and see the Q&A coming along.
Thank you. So good night, everybody.